Hi, good morning, and welcome to our Tuesday edition of our exploration of the exhibits here at the Keys History and Discovery Center. I'm Brad Bertelli, the curator, and since hurricane season started yesterday on June 1st, I thought we would explore one of our exhibits dedicated to hurricanes in general and the 1935 Labor Day hurricane more specifically. Now, the 1935 Labor Day hurricane still to this day marks the strongest hurricane to ever strike North America. And for our Upper Keys history and our Florida Keys history, it really changed the course of what was going on here in the Florida Keys. It also ended Henry Flagler's Oversea Railroad. It did just tremendous damage here in the Upper Keys and on Upper Matacumbe and in the Alamorada area, mostly. It was like Hurricane Andrew in 1991, I think. The Labor Day storm was massive. It was very powerful, but it was a very tightly wound hurricane. And the destruction, the storm surge and the hurricane force winds were really highly concentrated in a relatively small area. So while the hurricane was bringing 200-mile-an-hour winds and 18 foot of storm surge here to Upper Matacumbe, Lower Matacumbe, Long Key, in Key West they were experiencing like 28-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So, and even in Tavernier, where there was lots of destruction, it wasn't, which is 20 miles away, wasn't the wholesale just kind of disintegration of the community as happened here. Now with the hurricane, it was 1898 when the first hurricane warning system was inaugurated by President McKinley. And interestingly enough, in those days, a lot of the information was kind of like it was given by ships that were out at sea who would telegraph and what they were witnessing going on in the water. And that's kind of how the Weather Bureau, which prior to that was concentrated in New York, would kind of disseminate the information. In 1935, instead of one centralized location in New York, there were 4 Weather Bureau offices that were around, that were developed. I think Boston, New York, I'm not positive about that one, Jacksonville, Florida, and also San Juan, Puerto Rico, who were kind of all observing and sending information and to get a better sense of what was going on out in the tropics. Now, in 1935 was actually the very first year that weather buoys were put out in the water to collect data, which didn't have a real impact or any impact at all on what was happening with the 1935 storm. As you could imagine, the predictions and the forecasting were not nearly what they are today. In fact, they're like today when a hurricane comes, Doppler radar is telling us every gust, every squall, where it is, when to expect it. In 1935, they didn't know, what was going on. They didn't have any real information coming in. The locals who were here, were watching their barometer as the mercury fell, and they understood that as the lower the pressure went down, the closer something big was coming. And they had lived through hurricanes. These were people who were not necessarily new to the islands. These were, the Russells, the Pinders, the Parkers, people who'd been here for decades or longer. And they'd lived through many hurricanes, but no one had lived through or experienced something like what was coming in 1935. Now, just on Sunday, on September 1st, this storm was kind of out there in the water. They weren't really sure where it was exactly. They thought it was going to pass between Key West and the Dry Tortugas. It wasn't until 1 o'clock in the afternoon that the Weather Bureau announced that a powerful Category 5 hurricane was 80 miles offshore of the Matacumbe Keys. And 1 o'clock, the storm is 80 miles away. The forces were already coming at sea. The Parkers had gone to the post office to check their mail about 1 o'clock. And as they passed their store, which was, kind of up there right in that area, by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the winds were already so strong that the paper shingles were coming off the roof of their building. Now, we see some of the pictures behind us, and we see the Matacumby, the hotel, Matacumby Hotel, Hotel Matacumby. And that's where Ed and Fern Butters, who I've talked about a great deal, love to talk to them personally, but I've talked about them a great deal, because they've had a really interesting history with the development of the Upper Keys, moving from, to Miami to North Key Largo, coming down. They arrived here on Upper Matacumby Key and opened the Hotel Matacumby at about 1931. And the forecasting was so iffy back then that on the day of the hurricane, Ed Butters, told his wife that he was going to go up to Miami to check on a boat, a charter boat they were working on, and gather some supplies for the hotel. Now, before he left, he put on they knew something was coming. There was indications that there was a storm coming. So he, put up plywood over the windows and, kissed his wife goodbye and took his son Jack to Miami with him. And when they're in Miami at 1 o'clock, they get the weather report that this powerful hurricane is just offshore the Matacumby Keys. So he's on Flagler Avenue. He steps into one of the hotels and calls his wife to check on her. And he rings the hotel, and she is trying to remain calm when she's talking to him, and he's asking how are things, and she's trying to play it cool and say, oh, everything's okay, everything's fine, we'll be okay. And about that time, a gust comes in and slams one of the wooden boards kind of against the wall, and it frightens her, and she tells her husband, my God, it's blowing like hell down here. And that was unusual language for Fern Butters, who did not use strong language like that. And he knew right then and there that something was going on. He needed to come home immediately, or as fast as he could in those days. So he and his son got in their Plymouth and raced down to the island. It took about 4 hours, driving 80 miles an hour, driving through this oncoming storm. And he gets to the hotel about 4 o'clock, and they continue to kind of batten down, or 5 o'clock, and try to batten down, and secure the building as best they could. The storm continues to grow, and just the howling and the water's coming. And at this point, they've sent the train down to help rescue the people who are here, and also the World War I veterans who are in these work camps, and take them to safety on the mainland. The train, there's a lot of talk about the train, about them not bringing the train down fast enough, and there was some miscommunication about what they thought there could happen, how fast something could happen, and the trains, they had to call Jacksonville to get permission to get a train to come down. And Jacksonville calls Homestead, Miami, and gets the train ready, but it has to be fired up. The engine has to be fired up. They have to gather a crew. They have to they set out, and the train encounters a series of problems. First of all, they decide to turn the engine around, so they're going to back the train down, and then thinking that when they went to escape the Keys and go out of the Keys, that pushing the train would be faster than pulling the train. If the locomotive was pushing rather than pulling. They encountered an open drawbridge in the Homestead area, which delays the train. At Winley Key, they're coming down the tracks, and one of the cranes working in the quarry has fallen over, and one of the wires has crossed the railroad tracks and tangles up in the wheels of the locomotive, and that takes another 50, 60 minutes to untangle. So by the time the train arrives at Upper Matacumby Key at the train depot, the Islamorada Depot, it's 8:05, and people are on board the train. And about 25 minutes later, this significant 18-foot wall of water washes across Upper Matacumby Key and Lower Matacumby in this area, this horrific tidal surge, and knocks the train over. The locomotive stays upright, but the rest of the train is pushed over. Nobody aboard the train dies. Everybody aboard the train survives the storm. But going back to the Butters, they have tried to ride the storm out in this concrete structure of the Hotel Matacumby, this two-story structure. start to hear crashing, and the first floor starts to fall apart. So they go into a car, their car parked on the side, trying to ride the storm out there. The water comes in, and they need to go to higher ground. So there is a bus, a tourist bus that is parked behind the hotel, and they all link arms. There's a group of them, and they travel from the Plymouth to the bus, and they ride the storm. They're riding the storm out in the bus, and they decide they want to get to the highest ground possible because there's water still coming, still rising, and they try to make their way to the railroad tracks, which is the highest ground. And they all link arms, and they're starting to go, and then Ed Butters takes a step, and in the water steps on a board with a nail and injures his foot, and turns to his wife and says, "I can't make it." So they go back to the bus and ride the storm out on the bus with their family and other members of the community, and they do all survive inside the bus. When the storm ends and the winds die down and the water goes back away, the community of Matacumbe, of this Islamorada area, is just devastated. The trees are wiped, are broken and torn down. The hotels, there's a few resorts, the houses, they're all flattened. The Matacumbe Hotel behind me is one of these few structures that are recognizable. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the Rustic Inn, which is which was built in 1932, which was the precursor to the Green Turtle Inn. The Rustic Inn is rebuilt after the storm, and then in 1947, Sid and Roxy Sedaris purchased it, and it becomes the Green Turtle. But the storm does wreak havoc. Kills as many as 500 people, perhaps more. No one knows the exact number. And as the people are kind of walking, trying to get to this, to safety, they're walking up Upper Matacumbe Key, walking to Windley Key, and then kind of crossing over in boats. And from Windley Key, there's kind of a rescue camp that's created at Windley Key, kind of the area of what's today the Island Grill, which looks like it's finally going to open up after it was destroyed in 2017 Hurricane Irma. And from there, all these people are kind of are brought over to the Plantation Key in small boats, and then from Plantation Key, there's more. There are bridges still available, so people can access the mainland. All in all, we hope that nothing like that happens ever again. Certainly not this year. It's been an interesting, crazy year already, and there is a tropical depression out in by the Yucatan Peninsula already. This is the second storm so far of the year, and it's only the second day of the hurricane. That storm looks like it's going to head north and away from the Keys and kind of into the Yucatan Peninsula. So I don't think we have to worry about that one. But there's always the chance, that we're going to experience a storm here. And I know a lot of my friends ask me, how can you live on the Keys? They're just kind of out there isolated. And it's a beautiful place to be, and it's one of the things that you have to anticipate and kind of live through. It's part of the price of living in paradise. If anybody has any questions, we're going to Aaron will let me know if somebody wants to type in. If not, I know we have at our website keysdiscovery.com. We have our second of our kiosks available. That one talks about a little more Upper Keys history and Plantation Key and Windley Key. Next week, this particular kiosk will be available. It has a great interview I did about the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. It also has a more expanded version of the Ed and Fern Butter story. It talks about other significant hurricanes that have come through. Hurricane Donna in 1960, which was the biggest storm that happened after the 35 hurricane and caused significant destruction and deaths.
And that video is currently available on our YouTube channel. This full kiosk will be available next week as featured, but anybody can watch that video that's in there right now on our YouTube channel.
And that YouTube channel is getting chock full of videos. In the last 8 weeks, there was one on there maybe 9 weeks ago, and now there's probably 30 videos on there. We've got lots of content available for everyone to watch. If you don't have any questions for now, feel free to type them in. I'll respond to them later. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, and we are going to see you tomorrow night between 5 and 6 with Cocktails with the Curator. You need to sign up for that one, and you can find access or link to that on our Facebook page, also at Keys Discovery / virtual programs. And then Thursday we'll be back here at the Discovery Center. I'll be talking about the World War I veterans who came down and lived in these work camps that were highly affected by this hurricane. And then on Friday, weather permitting, for a field trip Friday, we're going to go down to Lower Matacumbe Key and look at the only remaining existence, what the veterans were working on, the only thing that kind of remains of the work they were doing that a lot of the locals call the coffins, and we'll debunk some of the local mythology about those and talk a little bit about that history. Everyone who's gone over Channel 2 Bridge, looking off to the right as they're heading down towards Key West, has seen those 8 structures in the water, and a lot of people wonder what they are. So that's what's going to happen on Friday. And until then, we will have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow and Thursday and Friday.